The Golden Triangle of fly fishing sits at the crossroads of Montana, eastern Idaho, and Wyoming, a region known for some of the most legendary waters on the planet, like the Henry's Fork, the Madison, the Snake, and much more. Today, we're joined by a guide who knows these waters inside and out and is representing Team USA at the World Championships this year in the Golden Triangle. She is here today to share some of her wisdom for this region and to let you know what makes it so special and help you plan that unforgettable trip out west. Hey, how's it going? This is Dave. I'm hosting the Traveled podcast today. I've been fly fishing since I was a little kid, grew up around a little fly shop, and created one of the largest fly fishing podcasts in this country. Today, Lindsay Szofran, trout and steelhead guide, is here to share some of her best tips on fishing these technical waters out west. This includes multiple states, Montana. We're going to talk Idaho, Oregon. You're going to find out how she is preparing for her next World Championship event in eastern Idaho. You're going to find out and discover how she fishes the longest undammed river in the USA, when you can start fishing that, the best time of year. And also, we're going to get into a little spey, steelhead and trout spey. She's got some big influencers, names that you've likely heard of before. We're going to get into all that today. Plus, we're going to hear about the legendary battle of the of Team USA fly fishing, ladies versus men versus youth. We're going to find out who would be the winner if we had a championship on that level. This episode of Travel Today is presented by Yellowstone Teton Territory, where you can explore great fishing, hunting, hot springs, winter sports, and so much more. We've been covering this, and we're going to dig in today to some of these actions. All right, so here we go. Let's do it. Lindsay Szofran from flyfishingadventures.com. How you doing, Lindsay?
Good morning.
Yeah, this is gonna be a fun one today. I think you have a lot going on out there. We're gonna talk a little bit today about kind of the Yellowstone area, the greater Yellowstone area. You've got some Grand Ron, some spey, steelhead trout, like all of that. These are going to be huge today. Plus, and the big thing is that the World Championships are coming. So as we speak, it's February. You know, this episode probably is going to go live in March or April, and right around the corner is the World Championship. So first off, let's just kick it off there. How does that feel? It feels like that's right around the corner. Are you stressed right now, or is that something that's just like you're ready to roll?
You know, it's coming up very quickly, and I'm very excited. This is the fourth women's only fly fishing world championships, and we get to host here in the United States, which, you know, it's just such a great opportunity to invite our friends that we've made from around the globe to come experience the greater Yellowstone ecosystem. You know, we're going to be holding the competition in the Golden Triangle. So, parts of Idaho, Montana, and Wyoming. There's just some really fantastic trout waters in that area.
So and I've heard that before, the Golden Triangle. So what is the triangle is what, Montana? Talk about that. What are the spots that make up that? And do you know where you're fishing right now?
We do know where we're fishing. And so the most southern river is going to be the Grays River, which is a tributary of the Snake. And then we'll also be fishing the Henry's Fork, as well as the Warm River. And then in all of these competitions, we also have a lake component. So 2 lakes that we're fishing. One is a private lake in the Island Park region called Sheridan Lake. And then one of my favorite lakes is Hebgen Lake in Montana, just on the edge of Yellowstone Park.
Wow, that's awesome. Yeah. So, and this is great because we've talked about a lot of these on the podcast. We've talked about Sheridan. We had a Stillwater school with Phil Roy. We've, Hebgen is one we haven't gone deep, but I've heard a lot about it. And of course, the Henry's Fork. So this is cool. So that's the rivers. Maybe before we jump in, because we're going to talk about your guiding program, what you do out in the Yellowstone area. And like we said, some of the steelhead stuff. But for the World Championships, what does your preparation look like? Like, let's just say from right now, like now until then, are you pretty much ready to go? Or do you do a lot of practicing, training? How do you, maybe talk about that a little bit?
It's always lots of preparation, always training. And right now we're in sub-zero temperatures here in Montana. This morning I woke up and it was 17 below. So I can't say I've been doing a ton of fishing in the last few weeks, but of course, there's lots of other preparations and plenty of flies to be tied, and always just research on the rivers and, getting boxes organized and just mentally preparing. Sometimes these competitions are as much of a, physical endeavor as they are a mind game. And so.
Right. I mean, it's really, I find it really interesting because I haven't ever been to one. So hopefully this year I'll learn a lot more about, the process. But we've had a lot of people on that have talked about it, just the competition itself. For you, have you been involved with the kind of the World Championships, the Team USA for a while? Maybe talk about that. What is your background? How did you come into being on the team?
My first involvement with Team USA goes back, I think, about 2014. And my husband had entered a competition, and I had volunteered to be a controller. And I rowed a drift boat around a lake and measured fish for the competitors. And so that was my first introduction into competitive fishing. So, but for the women's team specifically, it was back in 2020 that they announced they were going to have the first ever competition for, they actually call it ladies. And that was supposed to be held in 2021. So the normal way to choose a team is through competitive events and based on how you do in those competitions. Well, of course, during the pandemic, that was very hard. There was no competitions, no getting together. So there was a team, an inaugural team chosen based off of interviews and recommendations and things like that. And I was part of that inaugural team that then tried to, build the organization and get us prepared. Of course, with the pandemic, that got postponed an additional year. So because the world event then got postponed to 2022, we had the opportunity to actually have competitions and the first ever ladies national championship, which helped determine who would represent the United States at the world level in Norway for that first ever women's event.
Was that 2022 or 23?
That was 2022. In 2023, we went to Canada. In 2024, this past May, we were over in the Czech Republic. And then for the Fourth Worlds, of course, this coming July, we'll be hosting here in the United States.
There you go. So Norway, Canada, Czech Republic, United States now. And it's been interesting because I've been tracking this a little bit. I know the youth team has been doing well recently. I know there's a couple of the guys, right? The masters, there's a couple levels there. How have the women's been doing? How do you feel like, things are going? How do you feel like your chances? How does it look this year?
It's very exciting to be, on home waters, of course. And what's really great about our team, just going back to Norway, some of us had only known each other for 3 months before we were competing together as a team. And now that we've known each other for, 4 years now, we just have learned to, understand each other's fishing techniques, learned how to better communicate what's going on and to support each other to, do the best we can out on the water. And so, I think going back to Norway, I remember a conversation I had with the gold medalist, a gal from the Czech Republic, a fantastic angler. And at that time, I told her that we'd been fishing together as a team for 3 months. And she said, "Oh, we've been fishing together as a team for 15 years."
Oh, wow.
And so, you think about fishing with your best buddy and you just communicate. You learn to communicate with each other. You understand your style. You can go out and really be more effective when you can work well together.
Yeah, that's a big thing. So basically you're building this team. I mean, that's part of this. It's going to take some time to get up there. What do you feel like, when you look at this year, what would you be telling somebody's listening right now, maybe they haven't been to a world championships, what would you tell them? Why would they find this interesting to go and watch this event or maybe even volunteer? Talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, we're certainly looking for volunteers. And the most fantastic thing about volunteering is some of these volunteers will have the opportunity to be streamside and watching some of the best anglers fish. And it's an incredible opportunity to learn, especially some of those controllers will be on the same waters and they'll see how people from different countries fish the water, use different techniques. And if they want to take that back into their own angling, I think there's a lot to learn and it's a really incredible opportunity.
Yeah, it is. It's interesting because in this year, I think the way it's going to work is there'll be the women's and the youth are right. I think you're fishing different times, but this year in eastern Idaho, right?
Yeah, the events will be happening, at the same time.
Oh, okay.
We'll have an opening ceremony where we will all parade down the street together. And that's always just a really fantastic event for spectators to see, the flags waving from different countries, represented countries from all around the globe, with both youth teams and women's teams. And it's really just this really fantastic bringing people together for a common interest. What I love about it, every year, it just becomes more enjoyable because I've actually made friends with people from some of these other countries. So it becomes this reunion of friends and, this great camaraderie to go out and enjoy the sport and, respect the waters, be conservationist.
Exactly. What is the parade? I mean, that sounds really, really interesting. Is this what town is this in?
The event will be based out of Idaho Falls. And Idaho Falls has that great river walk, and we'll be marching along that.
Gotcha. Wow. So this is going to be Idaho Falls, yeah, which is really a cool place, and so there'll be this whole thing, this international parade, and then also, like we said, the volunteers. So I think, and we'll probably have a link out. I think Glade is kind of helping set things up, but we'll get people connected if they want to volunteer, or they can just reach out to me as well, and I can connect them because this sounds good. So, and when is the Idaho Falls, like when does the parade and when does the comp start?
So the opening ceremonies will be July 12th. And then the next day will be for athletes to prepare and get ready to start fishing. And fishing will happen on Monday through Friday. So each angler actually fishes 5 different venues throughout the week. So each country has 5 representatives, and one angler from each country is on one of those waters, and then you rotate through. And that's where, it being a team event, it's really crucial to be able to share intel with your fellow teammates because the waters that I'm fishing one day, my teammates fishing the next day. And I want to be able to give them as much information as I can to help them be as successful as possible.
Right. Gotcha. And when you're out there, so basically you're going to prepare for this, and it, as the home country, it seems like we would have the advantage, right? Because you're out there, the waters, you can prepare a little bit, but how does that look once you get out there? I mean, I guess conditions in July. Do you feel like you all, like Team USA has a chance at this? Is it like any year, does anybody have a chance, or do you feel like there's still a lot of work to do before you can get up on the podium?
You know, there's always a chance, but you can't ever just expect anything and you have to put the work in. And, you have to make smart decisions and have a good strategy and, but there's a lot of, curveballs that could always be thrown in. We have had events where waters have flooded, you just never know. And there is this, a little bit of a luck of the draw. I do feel that these waters that we'll be fishing, the beats are going to be very fair. And, sometimes you'll get a beat where there's just no, very few fish and one beat's just, full of them.
Right.
On these waters, I really feel like the beats are going to be fair, and it's going to be based on, the angler's skills and efficiencies in those waters.
Okay. And the waters you talked about, you mentioned a few of them, but some of the rivers, the Grays River, the Warm River, those are a couple we haven't talked about. And then you also mentioned some of the guiding you do on the Yellowstone. But now, have you fished the Grays River, or is it the Warm River? Or was that the other one?
Yeah, the Grays River, the Warm River, and the Henry's Fork. And, for me, fortunately, I have fished all of those rivers before. I grew up in this area and
Oh,
have
right.
spent many days fishing in the region. So I am excited about that. And, hopefully, can share some of my knowledge of the area with teammates, and all the teammates have fished those rivers as well, which is great. There's just something about knowing a river and understanding its, what do you
Yeah.
call it?
Kind of how it
It's,
changes.
yeah,
Well, you got so much. I mean, when I look at a stream, it's overwhelming for a lot of people, right? The trout streams, because you're thinking, okay, there's all these bugs, there's hatches, there's different temperatures and water temperatures, and you kind of sit there, and that's where you get lost, right? I think that's where fly fishing, and that's the great thing about it, because it can be challenging. So, and when you add competition onto it, I can imagine that, right? If you're not ready for the game, you could, you could maybe not do well. But yeah, those are the challenges, right? So when somebody comes, let's just take it to the Warm River, let's just take it to the Warm River. I've never fished the Warm River, but as you look at that one, does that in July, do you know what to expect for hatches? Do you know what you are already thinking, like what you might be fishing there?
Certainly we have a pretty good idea of what to be expecting. But as we know, with water temperatures and weather, oftentimes things might be a week early or 2 weeks late or whatever it might be. So we'll go in prepared for it, and always trying to make the best decisions along the way.
Gotcha. And so we got these rivers. Let's talk a little bit. Let's swing this a little bit, and we'll come back around probably to some of the comp as we go. But let's just stay in the area of the Yellowstone. So you're guiding. Maybe start off with your guiding operation. Where do you spend most of your time? I know right now you're probably not out doing much guiding, but once the season kicks off for you, what's the stream that you spend most of your time on?
Primarily I spend most of my time on the Yellowstone River and one of the tributaries of the Yellowstone called the Stillwater, which is actually a very deceptive name. It is nothing but still.
Mm-hmm.
It actually has quite a few, not huge, but quite a few rapids on it, and,
Yeah.
great riffles for fishing. And so,
Gotcha. Yeah. So I mean, everything out there's got some gradient. That's the cool thing about that country. Well, you do have still waters, of course, but you've got a lot of mix. And so when you're fishing the Yellowstone, so paint the picture there. This is a pretty decent sized river, right? Are you mostly floating it in drift boats or rafts?
On the Yellowstone, I have a drift boat and fish out of that. Obviously, a lot of listeners are probably familiar with the Yellowstone, bigger river, definitely has some calmer sections, but, there's definitely some places where you can hit some waves as well. But the drift boat's a great tool for that river, whether we're fishing out of the boat or using the boat as a tool to get from place to place and getting out and wading.
Getting out and going for it. And does the Yellowstone, do you fish? Maybe talk about that on the sections, because you've got this. I mean, it is an amazing area. We've talked about it, right? The Yellowstone area and the national parks. What area are you typically fishing, or maybe we'll keep it on the floating?
Where guide primarily is actually downstream of Livingston, where, it's, some old books that you might read say there's no trout down there. And I encourage people to keep believing that.
Right. Right.
Because it's not as heavily used.
Okay.
But, Yellowstone's a great, great river. It's the longest undammed river in the United States.
Oh, it is. Oh, the Yellowstone is the longest undammed river in the United States. That
Yeah,
is
just,
amazing. I didn't know that.
I just love freestones. And, the energy of a, free flowing river.
That is super cool. And do you know the length? Or I'm guessing. Let me guess it because I don't know. I'm just going to throw it out. It's what, like 500 miles long?
It is. I wish I remembered the exact number, but it's just a little over 500 miles.
Nice. I'm doing good. Okay, yeah, 500 miles. So
Good
so
guess.
an undammed river for 500 miles, which is in this day and age is pretty amazing, right? Because you think of all the dams. I mean, there's literally,
Truly.
probably tens of thousands of dams. I mean, who knows? But and then Livingston, maybe just describe your let's just take it to, I guess I'm guessing summer is peak time, but when is the time where, like, if we were sitting here talking to you thinking, oh, we want to get out on a trip with you this year, where would we be thinking? Would you say there's a certain month, a time, or a hatch we should shoot for?
Yeah, certainly summer is the height of the season. And we do have runoff that occurs. I always, say late May to mid June. And usually that's a time of year that's always out. Sometimes there's places to go, but it's, day to day. But by, mid to late June, usually the rivers are clear enough that we can get out there. And most of the season in that time, usually start on the Stillwater River. It clears before the Yellowstone River. And so we can get out and we fish that out of a raft. And at the beginning of the season, sometimes we are, we're in the boat all day because the river's still really high.
So yeah, we're kind of narrowing in on, we're narrowing in on the Yellowstone, like putting together a trip. I always love doing this because we have a group, we call it the shop, Wet Fly Swing Pro, where we've got some people in there that are building trips together, right? We're talking about where we're going next. So I'm thinking of this, like we're planning a trip to the Yellowstone. Maybe we're going to be driving by there. In fact, we just drove by this last summer on our way to Wisconsin. Didn't actually fish, although we stopped along the way. But let's just say that. So you got Livingston, we're going down river. So now you're saying it's high water on the Yellowstone, but probably, when does that come in? Is that more of a fall fishery, or is it sometime in August? Does that kind of get good?
Of course, it's dependent year to year, but usually by mid-July, the Yellowstone will shape up. So prior to its clearing, I'm usually on the Stillwater River, which clears much quicker. And it's a tributary that dumps into the Yellowstone near the town of Columbus. It's a great freestone. We use the raft on the Stillwater River, and, at high water, it's clear, but we probably mostly spend the day fishing out of the raft. As the water drops, then we can get out and do some wade fishing as well. And, the fun thing about the still water is, it does have some, fun rapids on it. So on those hot days, sometimes we just hang on to the rods for, a little bit and hit some waves and get wet and have a good
Right.
time with some whitewater as well as the fishing.
Are these kind of like class 2, 3 sort of thing, or is there some bigger stuff?
Yeah, like class two,
Yeah.
there's some bigger things at, certain water levels,
Oh,
but
certain water. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Have you ever been in the white water of any type where you've been a little bit kind of in a tricky situation, or maybe almost dumping or something like that?
My first experience with real whitewater was actually down in the Royal Gorge. And my husband used to guide there, and he took me there when we were still dating. And actually, I think we were married. Anyhow, he said, whatever you do, don't fall out of the boat. And whatever you do, don't fall out of the boat.
Yeah.
This is the biggest rapid on the river. Whatever you do, don't fall out of the boat.
Hold on.
Well, guess what? I fell out of the boat.
Really?
And went for a pretty good swim. And of course, it's the place where the photographer is set up to take all these pictures and then sell them. Well, I
No
had,
way.
a whole reel of me completely drenched
Oh,
and,
that's cool. That's cool.
so
So you still have those photos to this day that you got the action shots of you falling in.
yeah, and that was my
Oh, that's
first
funny.
real whitewater experience, and we had done that as a preparation because we were getting ready to go on a Grand Canyon trip.
Oh,
And I've been
nice.
lucky to have gone on several of those, just fun whitewater down there and
Yeah. Right.
and the Grand Canyon's just a special place, and there's so many oases and amongst the big whitewater and
Oh, that's great. So you've been on one of the rivers. We've talked a little about that over the years when we did our drift boat series on this podcast here, where we were kind of covering boats, and those dories, those wooden dories, I was really fascinated with because of those things, right? Taking a drift boat down through the Grand Canyon, through the Colorado. Did you see those when you were in the canyon? Did you see those wooden dories?
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to have one.
Yeah. What was that like? Did you saw them on the river? Was it? I guess you probably didn't see them go through whitewater, but are they
Oh,
just pretty?
absolutely. And
Yeah.
they have this great rocker on them. I mean, it just
Yeah.
looks like a fantastic ride.
Yeah, yeah, they have because we studied that. We actually had the guy who wrote the book on building drift boats, and he talked about the difference. Right, there's the two styles. You got the Rogue drift boat and the Mackenzie. One has a longer flat section, but what they did on those Grand Canyon boats is they made them just the right amount of flat on the bottom that they surf they work in the waves. Right, they're not done, because if you were to take a normal drift boat down through that, obviously you wouldn't have a chance.
No,
But
and the dories are all sealed,
and they're
so
sealed, yeah, and they're decked over and all that stuff. But no, I every time I get on that conversation, I'm always like excited because I haven't been there, and my goal would be to run that river in a drift boat, right? In a wooden drift boat. I've done a few technical things. I've been on the road with the drift boat, and I've been down some stuff, but I feel like that's the ultimate, right? But anyway, so that's our side note, our side tangent for the day. Let's take it back. So Yellowstone. Now we're looking at a trip now. And so again, you're thinking August. If we had to pick like right now, so let's just say we got a few people coming in that want to fish it this summer, where would you point us if we had to plan right now for the Yellowstone?
gosh, starting in late July through the fall, and fall, again, depending on the year, September can be really fantastic. You might get snow though too.
Right,
October,
right.
certainly, but
Sure.
it's just a really great river. And
Yeah. Is it a dry action thing, or is it a nymphing, or do you kind of do everything?
it's a little bit of everything. And each day it might even be a little bit of everything. And, it's the fish that tell us what it is for the day. Sometimes we all like to go out there and fish on our own terms of, I'm only going to throw dries today. But then there's days where you decide, nope, we're going to fish on the fish's terms. And it might be a little bit of every different type of technique in a day. So,
Yeah, it could be everything. And that's why, and that's same thing with the competition stuff, right? You don't know exactly, you're ready for, it could be anything. It could be dries or it could be Euro nymphs. Do you on the comps tend to fish? Is it more like 70% Euro nymphing? Do you find that's the case?
it's really interesting because most people think that comp fishing is just Euro nymphing. And to me, sure, you could go out there and just do that. But the successful anglers do it all. And it's using, a diverse techniques to fish your beat and make the best decisions to find the fish. And heck, and I've used everything from, Euro nymphing, of course. I had a session in the Czech Republic this past May. I used dry flies almost the entire session. And then I've used my trout spey in competitions as well. And so it's just having a lot of tools in the toolbox and knowing when to use the right tool.
When to use it. Okay. And going back to the rivers, the Warm River, the Grays River. Now talk about that. Which one is the trib to the Snake River?
The Grays River. Well, technically, all of them eventually end up in the Snake, but the Grays is down by Alpine, Wyoming. And
Okay. Alpine. And what about Warm? Where does the Warm River come in?
the Warm River, kind of near the town of Ashton, is probably the best way to describe it.
Ashton, yeah, Ashton, Idaho, right?
Yes. Yep. So,
Okay. Yeah, I'm trying to get my bearings on kind of where some of these. And is that river, when you think of the Warm River, is that one that's kind of off the radar, or do people know about that river? Is that pretty known?
it's probably not as well known as the Henry's Fork, of course, but the place that we're fishing at is just this really cool area where basically you have this ridge, and on one side is the Henry's Fork and one side is the Warm River.
Oh wow,
And
yeah,
they just, go down the two different sides of the ridge and then meet up.
I see it. Yeah, I'm looking at it now. You got the Warm River Campground. That would be the spot we would be heading to. You got the campground right there. And it's right. Yeah, I see. You got the confluence. So the Warm River comes into the Henry's Fork down just above, like you said, just above Ashton.
Yes.
Okay. Well, what is the Warm River? And do you guide the Warm River at all, or is that one you've just fished?
I've just fished it. It's over in Idaho.
Yeah.
So.
Oh, right. You're not. Yeah, you're a Montana guide, so you wouldn't be.
Correct.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay. Well, give us a little couple on that on the Warm River. So if somebody was preparing, let's just say they're going to be in that area. What would you tell them to prepare for that trip? Is that something easy to do? Would you direct them to certain fly shop, or what would be a couple of tips you give them?
Definitely that whole island park region is just fantastic. There are so many different rivers in that area. And if you find somebody at one spot, just drive or walk a little ways and you'll have waters to yourself, which is really a fantastic thing.
Yeah, there's plenty
And,
of water.
with all of these rivers, especially, if you're willing to walk, you'll definitely have water to yourself.
Yeah, which is a big part of it, right? Because you're just getting away from the pressure, so it won't be quite as tough to hook up into some fish.
Yeah, absolutely. And, I think it's also special to, be out there and not have to see other anglers.
Yeah, gotcha. Okay, and so when you're thinking of July, you're going to be there in this mid-July. What do you think is going to happen? Just if you had to guess, what are you preparing before thinking, well, there's going to be this hatch potentially? Or are you waiting till later in the year to see what that looks like?
I have a pretty good idea of what to expect and some hatches. Water in July is going to be high as well. So waiting in itself is going to, be a challenge. And you're not going to probably wade out to the middle of the river very
No.
easily. So, going to be trying to navigate the river and fish the edges and, try to get out as far as you can safely.
Yeah, safely, right? We don't want
Right?
anybody swimming.
Exactly.
Yeah, I just did an episode. I'm not sure if you've heard of Jim Teeny, but he's kind of a famous old guy from the West who fished everywhere. And we just had him on the podcast, and he told the story about his dad back in 1979 died in the river crossing. He was in a float tube fishing.
No.
He was fishing in a float tube, right? And I think it was on one of the rivers out in Oregon, and he just flipped over and drowned.
Oh, gosh.
Right. And so it's all these things I think people don't, you don't always think about. I don't, especially because I've been on so many rivers. I don't think about the safety, but it is legit. I mean, like stuff could happen. You can get caught up on a piece of wood, right? I mean, it happens every year, right? In all these streams, I think, I feel like. What do you think is, when you're waiting, maybe as far as safety, what do you think about? How do you say, what would be a couple of tips you might give somebody to stay safe while waiting, or things you're thinking about?
One of the things that I've done many times, I probably do it steelhead fishing more, especially when I was learning, is to take your wading jacket, have your wading belt, put your wading jacket on, and then put a wading belt, or quite honestly, a lot of times I use an NRS strap, a boat strap,
Oh, yeah.
and then
Oh, yeah.
just cinch that down really tight, and then you'll be able to wade out there a little bit deeper, and you've got a good tight, secure belt around your waist.
Oh, so are you saying you put your waders on and then your wading jacket, and then you cinch the belt around your wading jacket and over the waders?
Yes.
Oh, that's a good idea, right? So now you've got almost like a dry suit kind of set up.
Yeah, a little bit, it helps.
To a certain point, if you're swimming, you're going to get water in, right? But I feel like that's one of the things. The wading belt is a big safety thing, because even if it's just on your normal, just the waders, like if you were to swim and it's on tight enough, you'll be fine. In fact, the waders have air in there, so they kind of tend to float a little bit, right? At least for a while.
And the other thing, I see with beginners especially, is a lot of times when they're wading, they will have their feet pointed straight downstream. And then the current can push you a little bit more. I always encourage people to get sideways with the current, and then you can actually kind of brace yourself a little bit more and kind of dig that downstream foot in.
There you go. That's a good tip. Okay, so sideways, and then also you can, in certain situations, right, even a wading staff can help. Do you ever use that? Is that something that you find useful?
There are a few, and just a few, runs on steelhead rivers where I use a wading staff. Usually I don't like to carry one, and I feel like I'm a pretty confident wader, but there's a few where those rocks are just another level.
They're another level, yeah, and it can be helpful for other things too. I always think of rattlesnakes in Idaho. Are there rattlesnakes out there where you're fishing, or in Montana?
Where the competition waters are, there won't be, it's higher elevations. Although there's rattlesnakes around, I don't see them very often in the, lower elevations, but
Yeah,
they
it's
do exist.
possible. Yeah. I find out where we are, definitely there's snakes, so it's nice to have that to kick the brush a little bit and sort of thing. But so okay, so those are good. I think the tips on that. What about the comps? So you got ladies, you got the youth, and the men is separated in masters and seniors, or no? What are the two?
Masters, which are over 50, and then seniors, which is technically just adults.
Yeah, adults. See, and I always get that confused because I think in golf it's the opposite, right? Masters is the younger and senior. So that's something maybe Glade could work on, move it ahead to get that on track. But no, we got it. So it's seniors. So when you look at the four, is it, as far as if there was a head-to-head about like USA, right? The four, ladies against the youth against the two men. Is it a fair competition, or do you think that stuff like weighting and things like that are a big differentiator as far as being bigger or stronger, stuff like that?
Here in the US, we actually all compete against each other in smaller regional competitions or even at, the national level. And so, I think I compete against the men, the women, my teammates compete against the men, and, oftentimes are very successful and do very well. And so, I think the special thing about having a women's only competition is it helps with participation, and it gives, more women the opportunity to be ambassadors of our country and ambassadors of the sport. And we hope that that encourages other women to get out and, be involved in fly fishing, or even hopefully it encourages them to be involved in other activities that they're interested in. And I think not only here in the US, but on, a global level.
Yeah, that's well said. I think that's what's awesome about it. I think that, yeah, I mean, we're all fishermen, right? Everybody's anglers, whether you're a youth or a man or a woman, right? We're all in the same. But it does, I think, gives it something. I think I don't know what it is. It feels, well, again, if you look at all sports, there's not, you look at the NBA, it's not men and women playing together, right? It's not like there's separation there for a reason.
I think sometimes if it was always competing against the men, I don't think as many women would participate. I think a few of us would, but I think this encourages a lot more to be involved. I really do.
Be involved. Okay. And at the event, what would be your shout out to people, and to get people out? Do you feel like there will be, you've obviously got volunteers. We're going to try to round up some volunteers for it, but is there on the event, is there an opportunity for people to come there? You mentioned the opening ceremony, but actually be around the event. Like, how could people support this if they're listening now?
Certainly we always appreciate all the cheers and support. We are looking for volunteers. There's still some sponsorships available for the event. And then people can certainly come out and watch. And the lakes, I would bring some binoculars, but you can watch anglers fish on both of the lakes and on the streams. Frankly, anybody who wants to come out and watch could walk up and down the stream and watch anglers fish.
Oh, you can. Yeah. So the way this is going to work, so you're going to be out there, let's say you're on that warm river that day. You could come to the events and you could literally, as people are fishing, you could sit there and just be like nearby and watch what they're doing.
Yeah, you certainly could. And, beautiful rivers, they're just beautiful rivers to be on. And
it's a beautiful area. So I think for me, I think what it is like you said, it's the area. We call it the Golden Triangle. It's this famous area with the Henry's Fork and all these famous waters, Montana, Wyoming, Idaho. And then it's, so it's getting out there. So you could be doing, just a trip in the area. But the cool thing is it has this event, right, where you could support, you guys and the USA and that whole thing, which is kind of another level, which is great. So cool. Well, that's that. I want to, before we get out of here in a bit, I don't want to miss some of the other stuff you do. So, and of course, as always, we're not going to get to everything, but let's touch base a little bit because we do have some steelhead anglers and, and all of that here. What's it seems like your other life, right? You got this Montana trout thing going, and then do you switch? When do you switch, and when are you heading out more towards like thinking steelhead?
Boy, by late September, actually mid-September, I'm packing up my camper trailer and I'm heading west. And I spend most of my fall guiding. And, frankly, I love trout. I live in trout world, but my passion really is, steelhead, and holding that two-handed spey rod in my hand is like the comfort of holding a hot cup of tea. I just love it. And it's where I want to be in the fall for sure.
Yeah, in the fall. So is that like, so you wrap up your season, the trout, in say September, and then by October, is that when you're heading there?
Yeah, I'm wrapping up my guide season. My husband's an outfitter, and we have other guides that still continue guiding for us in Montana. But my husband and I both head out to Steelhead World in late September, and then we're there for the remainder of the fall, whether it be for guiding or, some personal fishing as well.
Yeah, I see. So, and the Grand Rod, is that the river you're fishing all fall?
But the Grand Rod is the river that I guide on.
Oh, okay. Yeah, so you're guiding. And what's the operation? What are you staying at a lodge, or or is it your own program out there?
I'm actually, Scott O'Donnell has a lodge out there, Spey Water Lodge. And I've been out there with Scott for many years, as well as my husband. And
who is your husband? We've talked about this a little, or you've mentioned this. Who is your husband here?
Andy Szofran.
Yeah, Andy. Okay, good.
And so he's the one who really took me under his wing, taught me how to fish. He's my coach for competitive fishing, and obviously my biggest supporter.
There you go. Yeah. So and we didn't get into your whole backstory, but that's kind of how it came, right? You ran into, so Andy got you into it, and then you've taken it to the next level, it sounds like.
Yeah, he helped me take it to the next level for sure. So
yeah. Okay. So talk about just a little bit on the Grand Ron. Again, so somebody hasn't maybe fished it. What does that look like? And is October the peak, or is it more like November? When is the time when steelhead where it's really on?
It starts in late September, and then, with steelheading, the later in the season, the more fish that have, potentially come into the system. But great fishing, September through November. And we run two different programs out there with Spey Water Lodge. One is where guests would come to the lodge and they get to fish for 3 days and come back every day, take a hot shower, stay in a, cabin, get a great meal in the evening. The other program is where they actually come out and they float down the river and for 4 days, and each night they camp out on the river and move down, and just a great overnight trip. Just one of the best.
One of the best, right? So you've got the two. So you have the Spey Water Lodge, which is actually a lodge. So you actually have a place with a normal, typical lodge, all inclusive, like food, everything covered. Is that how that looks?
Yes, absolutely. And then for those overnight guests that are going to be down on the downstream on the river camping out, they come into the lodge the first night, get a meal at the lodge, get organized, and then head out the next morning. And then they're glamping. So, they've got great tents with, cots and heaters.
It's
and,
comfortable.
The comforts.
Yeah, it's
and,
comfortable.
Just the crew just does, fantastic meals out on the river. And it's, sitting out, eating dinner underneath the stars is just fantastic.
It's perfect. So that's it. So you got the lodge and the river. I mean, both of these it sounds like just epic trips, and you're getting both in. What is it? I always have to check in on, just because the steelhead, we fish, all over kind of around the Pacific Rim, a lot of that. Plus, we've done some Great Lake stuff, but obviously that's different. How have the runs been as far as numbers? Have you seen some big ups and downs in the Grand Ronde since you've been out there?
Oh, absolutely. It's one of those where when I was first learning to do this, the numbers of
Which was when? When was that? I'm just curious because we've talked a lot about the steelhead run stuff. When did you first when was your first steelhead or spey, action?
mid 2000s.
Okay, yeah, so you're right. Yeah, so you're right in the middle of pretty much mid 2000s was right. We were starting to get into like some of the best runs. 2008 was like huge, right? Big runs.
Right. Huge numbers, and my ability to go out there and, cast well and fish it well, I was just learning, but I was catching fish. And now I feel like, I've gone through this transition where, now I can cast far, I can fish it well and effectively, and there's fewer fish.
There's fewer fish, right? It's hard. So you're catching, right. And so I guess it's hard to say, but now on the Grand Ronde, there's a typical session, and I think this is just steelhead in general. If you go out and you have a shot at a fish, right? Maybe one interaction, maybe one fish landed, something like that in a session. Is that pretty typical for the Ronde?
I say, if one fish a day is a great day, and sometimes we're lucky and, we find more than that. But, a fish a day is a successful day. And, for me, I love this balance for myself, of loving to fish for steelhead. And one fish or no fish is just fine. But then when I go to competition, I want enough fish. It's one fish or enough fish to win. And so there's days where I love doing both. And it's this really great balance of, respecting the rivers and the fish and the situation.
Right on. Well, let's take it out here really quick and we'll hop out. I have a few more random questions for you, but this is our casting challenge segment that we have here, and we've got a really cool thing doing. We're doing basically a casting challenge where we're going to have everybody go through a series. We're going to have some of our biggest casting instructors come on and talk about some tips, right? Some exercises they can do to get their cast. And we've got Bruce Richards. Bruce Richards is coming up, and the cool thing is that they're going to potentially win a rod. Togiak River Lodge has given away this really cool custom rod. So whoever completes the challenge has a chance to win the rod. But for this casting challenge for you, maybe talk about that, the spey. What would be your tip for somebody thinking spey? Maybe they're thinking they're a single hand caster. They've been trying a little bit. They've been struggling. Do you have a tip, or what was your transition into spey like? Did it take a long time to get up to the next level?
Fortunately for me, I was able to be surrounded by some of the best.
Right, like Scott O'Donnell. Scott O'Donnell is a famous, right, famous angler.
Yeah. I learned from Scott O'Donnell, Mike McCune, Whitney Gould,
Oh,
and my
wow.
husband, Andy Szofran. So I learned from some really great casters, and that really helped me, with my learning curve. But my number one piece of advice for anybody with their cast, especially a spey cast, single hand cast, my number one tip is watch. Watch your line. You must see and witness what is going on. If you do not watch, you will not be able to take it to the next level.
Right. That's awesome. Yep. So watch. So basically the whole thing, you can look at where your D loop is, where your anchor point, like just watch the whole thing. And you can do it pretty easy, right? All you have to do is turn around as you're setting your D loop up to see it.
Well, it's watching the initial setup, watching, the anchor, watch the lift, watch the line come off the water, watch your line pivot in the water, watch the D loop form, watch. And that will also help build consistency.
And why does that? How does watching it help build consistency?
A lot of times, with your spey cast, with that initial setup, if you just lift, sometimes you got way too much line upstream, sometimes you got way too much line downstream. But if you watch, and you can always get it in the same spot, then there's this, what's happening. And there's this thing that happens with the hand-eye coordination. It's a lot harder to tell your arm to be at a particular angle in this degree versus, hey, just watch it and your body and hand-eye coordination will naturally make things happen.
Oh, right.
Almost kind of like, shooting a basketball,
Oh, right.
you know?
Yeah. Is that how it works? I think because basketball was definitely, I've shot, lots of basketball hoops, but yeah, I guess that's how it works. Yeah. You shoot and you can actually see your form, like the follow through, and that helps to see it going in the hoop.
Yeah, it's just, really watching and knowing what's going on. And, you can't make a good forward stroke if everything is not aligned properly. And many times with the spey cast, people are trying to make that forward stroke while they still have, a bloody L in the line, for instance.
Right. Yeah. That's it. That's why it's so important. Yeah, because the forward stroke isn't going to be good if you got some crazy stuff going before that. Awesome. Cool. What about spey? So we talk steelhead, but what about trout spey? Is that something, because a lot of people listening here probably, maybe aren't going steelhead fishing, but is trout spey, like say out in the Yellowstone? It seems like that with those bigger rivers, that might be good. Are you doing some of that?
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
Yellowstone's a fantastic river for that. And, part of the fun about spey is you can cast far. It's not necessary most times, but it's fun. And the Yellowstone does allow us to do that. It's got some great riffles. And, if we can be out there and, say there's a great caddis hatch going on and we can be swinging soft tackles. Oh my gosh, that's just so much fun.
Yeah, soft tackles.
That's just a dream.
That's it. Awesome. Yeah, there's lots of overlap here. So cool. Well, let's take it out of here. We've got our little random segment, like I said, to check in here, and a couple things you mentioned today. So first on the drift boats, going back to that, I'm curious on the drift boat. What's your boat of choice? Maybe talk your drift boat and your raft. What brands are you using out there?
My favorite drift boat is an Adipose.
Out of Helena, right?
Absolutely. Another Montana company, which is great. And we have the Runoff. And then I also have an old Clacka that's just got the huge bow up front. You can hit some big waves with it.
Like old school. You got like a Clacka big, just a normal pointy, high
the weight
side boat.
forward.
Yeah.
I just love that boat. It's been in the family for many years and we've thought about selling it at times and we just keep hanging on to it.
That's it.
And then my fleet of rafts are all airs out of Idaho.
Yeah, airs are great.
Yeah, they really are. I've only had one incident where we popped a tube, and that was actually on a Grand Canyon trip, and came through a rapid, thought we came through clean, and all of a sudden, one tube was deflating very rapidly.
Oh, wow.
But
while you're in the rapid?
And so we're trying to get to shore as quickly as we could.
Man.
But with that inner bladder system, repair was just so easy.
Oh, that's right. Yeah, that's the cool thing about air is they have the unique thing. They've got the outer layer, which is a normal outer layer, but then they got that thin, the actual tube is inside, right? It's inside it.
It is. Yeah. We were able to just do a quick repair with some duct tape and get us back on the water. And then, then when we had good camp, we were able to repair it.
There you go. There you go. Yeah. Duct tape is my tip of the day is Gorilla tape, right? I'm a huge duct tape. I love the duct tape, but I'll tell you that
fixes a lot of things.
It does. The Gorilla tape, if you haven't used that yet, it's like even stickier. Like that stuff. Duct tape will eventually wear out and fall off. Gorilla tape never wears out.
It's good stuff.
Yeah, it's crazy. So, okay, so you got the drift boats, you got the Adipose, you got the old Clack, and we're actually going to have another Clackacraft episode, I think, coming up soon. So we got that. And then what about on the random segment? So YouTube, are you doing any YouTube videos for your fishing, or are you like watching? Like if you're to, turn on YouTube, what do you get sucked into? What's your videos out there?
I will be honest. I am horrible at social media. I've always felt like, for me, I either spend my time on the water or I spend my time at the computer. And I've really I've always preferred to spend that time on the water. I do love using YouTube, and, I love listening to the podcast. And frankly, my husband and I are both readers. We have a, massive library of fishing books, new as well as the classics. And,
That's it.
I love a good book.
Do you have a good book you're reading now, or do you have a good, maybe a fly fishing book, classic or something like that you really love?
I kind of giggle big. This is my husband's influence, in Steelhead. But greased line fishing
Oh
is
yeah, by is that Jock Scott or
correct. Yeah.
yeah, right. Yeah, grease line. That's old school, right? The little old school book from whenever it was back.
Yes.
I think he wrote that for Atlantic salmon fishing, right? Was
Correct.
that back in the day? Yeah.
Yep.
That is really cool. I love that because, especially now, because I've always been a summer steelhead fisherman, right? And got in winter, but I've never fished for Atlantic salmon. So this year we're doing that for the first time, right? Heading out to see.
Cool.
So it'll be cool to tell the difference, feel like, okay, this Atlantic salmon versus the summer steelhead, and then to actually have right. Cause I remember that I have that book on my shelf too. I remember when I was a kid reading that, and it's pretty awesome because it's a different game, isn't it? Summer steelhead versus winter steelhead.
It is. And, but, it's always just trying to use the best techniques for the situation.
Yeah. Awesome. Okay. Well, and you mentioned podcasts, so I don't want to miss that one before we get out of here. Do you have a certain podcast types, genre, or do you have a favorite podcast you listen to?
I listen to all the fishing ones.
Oh, you do?
Of course. So
what's your favorite, other than ours, of course?
Well, yours, of course, right?
What's your favorite other fly fishing or fishing podcast you listen to?
I think April does a good job.
Oh yeah, April does. Yeah, that's right. The Anchored. I think she's still going strong with her stuff as well. So good. All right. Well, that's I think what we have for today. Like we said, the competitions are coming, so that will be the big shout out today. Is to check out what would you leave people with today as they're thinking. We talked about the upcoming, in July, it's right around the corner, or even the next year, because the men I think are going to be in the same area the following year. What would you like to leave people listening now with to understand about, maybe with the competitions, with the, Team USA, just everything you have going there?
It's going to be a fantastic event. And, to see people from around the globe who are all coming together for a common purpose, we kind of sometimes think about the Olympic values, and it's excellence in sports, creating friendship, and, just respect for the event, the other countries' respect for, the fish, the river. And it's going to be a really fantastic opportunity to see this level of angling happening here in the United States. Certainly, we welcome spectators, volunteers. We are looking for, and we can definitely, we'll have a link, but you can also go to usangling.org, and under the women's team, there's a form where you can sign up to volunteer.
Oh, nice.
And so, we're going to have that opening ceremony parade. We'll also have a closing ceremony with awards. There's a conservation symposium that's also going to be part of the event. And so just truly exciting to be able to represent the United States and, the sport of fly fishing is really, truly an honor.
That's perfect. I love how you said that. The excellence, friendship, respect, right? That's a good way to leave it. I think we could leave this one today. So like we said, we'll also send everybody out to flyfishingonlyadventures.com if they want to check with you and see about any trips coming up here. But yeah, Lindsay, this has been awesome. Really appreciate your time today and shedding some light on all this, including, the upcoming events and everything. And we'll hopefully be in touch with you and maybe see you out there moving ahead.
Great. Thanks so much, Dave.
All right, quick call to action for you today before we get out of here. If you can, check in with Glade at Team USA. We'll have links in the show notes. You can find out how to get involved if you want to be a volunteer. They're always looking for volunteers. And if you just want to go hang out and watch some of the best in the world this year and next, we're going to have the men next year as well following up. So check in. You could also check with me, Dave, at wetflyswing.com anytime, and I can get you information. But head over there and support Team USA. If you haven't heard, we are kicking off the YouTube channel fully. We've got it out there. It's been out there a while, but now we've got great content coming every day. And the most recent YouTube video is Jonathan Farmer. He did a fly tying demonstration on steelhead. This was almost a 2-hour session we did with him. And actually next week, we've got Bruce Richards coming on live, our live webinar series. You can go to wetflyswing.com/webinar anytime and sign up to join one of those webinars. These are awesome. It's a way to see take this further, take some of the best guests we've had on this podcast and see them on video and take everything a bit further. If you're interested in some of our trips, we are heading to the lodge at Palisades Creek. This is also out in this neck of the woods on the Snake. If you want to fish the South Fork of the Snake, which we've heard about, check in with the lodge at Palisades Creek and check in with me again. We're going to be putting together a crew of people who want to fish one of the iconic rivers out here. We're going to be floating it, staying in an amazing lodge at the lodge at Palisades Creek. Thanks for checking out Travel today. I hope you can live that dream trip this year and experience that road less traveled.